It was late, like that awkward time after work when you're not ready to go home yet, so you just sit in the car with the engine off, listening to it tick while it cools down. Parking lot mostly empty, fluorescent lights buzzing. I remember feeling tired in a really specific way. Not exhausted, just worn down enough that my brain didn't want to do anything extra. And that's when it hit me how easy it is for things to slide by unnoticed when you're tired like that. People talk about being held back like it's this dramatic force, like something is actively pushing against you. But most of the time, it doesn't feel like that at all. It feels quiet, normal, familiar. Nothing feels wrong enough to stop and look at. I've had so many nights like that where I told myself everything was fine, mostly because nothing was screaming for attention. And sitting there, I realized how often fine is where things get stuck. For a long time, my main financial checkpoint was pretty simple. If the rent cleared, the car payment went through, and the lights stayed on, then I figured I was doing okay. Not great, but okay. I didn't feel reckless. I wasn't missing payment. So I kind of stopped there. That became the bar. And the weird part is how comfortable that feels. You're not broke, so you don't panic. You're not flush, so you don't think too hard either. I lived in that space for years without really noticing it. Every month was a quiet repeat. Bills in, paycheck out, credit card somewhere in the middle. I didn't feel stuck because nothing was technically wrong. And this is the part I didn't want to look at first. How survival slowly replaced movement. And how easy it is to confuse getting by with going somewhere. Subscriptions were the first thing that really got my attention. Mostly because they annoyed me. Not in a dramatic way. Just that low-level irritation when you scroll through a statement and think, wait, what is that again? $10 here. 15 there. Music, shows, storage, an app I swear I needed at the time. None of them felt expensive on their own. That's why they worked. I remember finally adding them up one night. Not even out of discipline, just curiosity. It came out to about $85 a month, which didn't sound insane until I let it sit there for a second. That's over $1,000 a year for things I barely thought about. I couldn't even name half of them without checking. That's when it felt uncomfortable. Not because I was broke, but because I realized how much money could leave my life without ever passing through my attention. Food was next. And this one took longer to admit. Not restaurants you plan for. I mean the forgettable stuff. Drive-through meals on the way home. Delivery when the couch already had me. Gas station snacks because I didn't feel like stopping again later. I told myself it was convenience, or being busy, or honestly just being tired. And individually, it was always reasonable. $18, $22, nothing worth stressing about. Until I actually looked at a month and realized it was pushing $400. On food I couldn't even remember enjoying. It's almost $5,000 a year. Not on experiences, not on something memorable, just on not wanting to think for a few minutes. That one sat heavy because it wasn't indulgence, it was avoidance. And it was expensive in a really quiet way. Upgrades are sneaky because they feel earned. A slightly better phone plan, the premium version of something because it's only $5 more, a nicer seat, a faster option. None of it feels irresponsible. I used to tell myself I wasn't splurging, I was optimizing. The problem is how permanent those decisions are. That extra $5 becomes part of the baseline. You don't downgrade later. You just forget you ever had a cheaper version. I started realizing how many of my monthly expenses were built on tiny upgrades stacked on top of each other. 5 here, 7 there, 10 somewhere else. Suddenly that's an extra $100 every month I don't even think about. $1,200 a year just to feel slightly less annoyed. And I couldn't honestly say my life felt meaningfully better because of it. Credit cards were the one area where I thought I was being responsible. I wasn't maxing them out. I paid more than the minimum. Everything felt under control. That was the story at least. What I didn't notice was how calm I felt about carrying a balance. $3,000 just sat there month after month, like a piece of furniture. I wasn't scared of it, which should have been the clue. One night, I finally did the math on interest just to see. Depending on how long I let it ride, that balance could cost me another $1,000. Not all at once. Slowly, quietly, just for waiting. That realization didn't feel dramatic. It felt embarrassing. Like I'd been paying a fee for procrastination and calling it normal. Raises are supposed to help. That's the whole point. I remember getting a small bump at work once. about $300 more a month after taxes. I felt relieved for maybe a week. Then life adjusted. Groceries got a little nicer. Eating out happened a little more. A few months later, the money was gone and nothing had changed. That's when I noticed how spending learns. It stretches to fill whatever space you give it. I didn't consciously decide to spend more. I just stopped saying no as often. Looking back, that raise didn't move me forward at all. It just made my routine more expensive. And that was uncomfortable, realizing that earning more doesn't automatically mean escaping anything. There was a long stretch where I just didn't look at my numbers, not because I was scared, I just didn't feel like it. Nothing urgent was happening. Bills were paid. So I avoided checking balances, avoided totals, avoided patterns. It felt peaceful in a way. Ignorance without anxiety, but that peace had a cost. This is the part I didn't want to look at first. How much control I gave up just by not paying attention. I remember finally sitting down and realizing I couldn't explain where a few $100s a month was going. Not because it was stolen, because I never asked. That moment didn't feel empowering. It felt like waking up late. Gas was one of those things I told myself was unavoidable. Prices went up. What was I supposed to do? An extra $10 or $12 a week didn't feel worth thinking about until I added it up. $600 a year, just on the increase. For the same commute, the same traffic, the same frustration, I never adjusted anything because it felt out of my hands. And that's the trick. When something feels inevitable, it stops getting examined. That money just quietly left my life, and I treated it like weather, uncontrollable, neutral, but it still counted. Comparison didn't show up as jealousy for me. It was subtler. Coworkers talking about vacations, friends upgrading apartments, family members casually mentioning purchases. I didn't feel behind exactly. I just didn't want to feel out of place. So spending decisions started getting framed as normal, expected, reasonable. I bought things not because I wanted them, but because not having them felt awkward. And that's expensive, because normal is a moving target. I didn't notice how much money I spent just to stay aligned with other people's choices. Not better off, just not visibly behind. Future me carried a lot of responsibility for a long time. I kept telling myself I'd deal with things later, save later, adjust later, cut back later. It always made sense because present me was tired. The problem is future me is just me, but with less energy and more history. I borrowed peace from him constantly. And when I finally thought about it, that felt uncomfortable because nothing magical happens between now and later. There's no reset, just accumulation, good or bad. Fees are small enough to ignore, which is why they work. Late fees, convenience fees, service charges. I paid them with annoyance, not alarm. $5 here, $12 there. It never felt like a big deal until I noticed how often it happened. A couple $100s a year, just for being a little late or a little impatient. Money spent on nothing. That realization didn't make me angry, it made me tired. Like I was leaking effort without noticing. I spent a surprising amount of money on protection, warranties, extra coverage, insurance add-ons. It all felt responsible, smart even. But when I looked closer, I realized I was paying a lot to guard against unlikely disasters while ignoring very real, ongoing habits. I was afraid of big, rare problems, not slow certain ones. And that imbalance cost me more than I expected. Time is expensive when you trade money for tiny amounts of it. Faster shipping, premium lanes, paying extra to avoid minor inconvenience. I did that constantly. And somehow I never felt less busy. The minutes I bought never added up to rest. They just disappeared. That one stuck with me. Paying more to feel less stressed and ending up exactly as stressed as before. Rewards became a routine. Long day, treat, hard week, treat. I wasn't celebrating. I was coping. And coping adds up. Those small rewards turned into expectations, and expectations are expensive. I didn't notice how often I spent money just to feel okay for a moment. Not happy, just okay. I leaned on optimism a lot. Things will improve. Income will go up. Expenses will smooth out. That belief bought me time, but it also delayed action. I waited for conditions to change instead of noticing patterns. Optimism isn't bad, but it can be costly when it replaces attention. I told myself stories. Everyone does this. It's temporary. And it's not that bad. And they worked. Those stories made discomfort disappear. They didn't make consequences disappear. That realization was rough because the stories felt harmless, comforting, even, but they weren't free. Looking back, the patterns feel obvious. At the time, they were invisible. That's the unsettling part. Nothing dramatic happened, no collapse, just years that felt busy and unchanged. Money didn't ruin my life. It just quietly shaped it while I wasn't looking. Awareness didn't feel like a breakthrough. It felt heavy because noticing doesn't fix anything. It just removes excuses. And sitting with that is uncomfortable. There's no applause. Just silence and numbers and a sense that you can't unsee certain things anymore. Another late night, lights off, phone face down, everything quiet. And that's what sticks with me. The idea that what holds people back rarely makes noise. It doesn't shout, it hums. And once you hear it, you can't quite ignore it again. I just sat there thinking about that. Not doing anything yet, just noticing how heavy quiet can feel and letting that thought hang there a little longer than was comfortable.